Tiens, on a découpé une femme en morceaux rue de la Bienséance à 2 pas du chat. Tiens, on a découpé une
I am a feminist.
Quand une femme est violée, on commence par dire mais...
Vu le nombre de femmes qui sont concernées en France...
Elle n'avait qu'à pas exister.
Je trouve incroyable qu'on ne dise pas un peu ce qu'on vit dans ces moments-là.
Je vous vois, je vous crois. We owe future generations a world free of sexual violence.
How powerful women can be when we do stand together.
Bienvenue dans la poudre.
C'était il y a 3 ans.
C'était il y a 14 ans.
J'ai été violée à 7 ans, harcelée sexuellement à 19 ans par un policier.
Un ami de mes parents.
Il y a quand même un problème à régler avec le désir de l'homme.
What were you doing on Saturday, the 17th of January 2015? Do you remember? Chanel Miller was spending the weekend with her little sister, who was studying at Stanford University in California, near San Francisco. It was just a random Saturday evening on the campus. There was a lot of booze, all dolled-up young women, out-of-control young guys. Music was probably too loud. Uptown Funk by Mark Ronson featuring Bruno Mars was the thing at the time. On that Saturday night, Chanel Miller is partying with her sister. She drinks a little too much. She mixes up alcohol. She laughs. She dances. She's usually a bit shy. And on that night, she's surrounded by people slightly younger than she is. She might get too drunk because of that. Anyway, when Brooke Turner drags her out, she's definitely too drunk to get what is going on. And when, a few moments later, 2 young Swedes cycling close by catch Brooke Turner wriggling on top of Chanel's half-naked body on the ground behind a dumpster, she's already unconscious. The Swedes shout. Brooke Turner runs. He's pinned to the ground by the 2 solid guys. Chanel is brought to the hospital, still unconscious. It's not before the following day that she will learn that she might have been sexually assaulted. What happens next, you might know already. It's one of the key rape trials in the United States judicial history. The trial, like the rape, upturned the life of Chanel Miller, who will be called Emily Doe during the years of procedures. At the end of it, she will write a long text that will be read several million times across the globe. Without her victim impact statement, there might never have been a Me Too movement. There it is. I wanted to give you the beginning of this story, to tell you about the fluttering of a butterfly's wing, this decisive micro-detail, this fork in the narration road that changes the course of history. I will leave it to Chanel Miller herself to tell you the rest. I am Lorraine Bastide, and you're listening to Me Too, and Now, episode 6, Chanel Miller. Chanel Miller, it's such an honor to be with you today. Thanks for accepting this interview. So, you are an author, an artist, a podcaster, a stand-up comedian, and your book, Know My Name, that you released 2 years ago in English, has just been translated to French. In French, it's translated to I Have a Name, which is slightly different. I think a bit less political than the original title, but I'm a bit picky on translations. Anyways, your name should have become known thanks to your talent. You write so well, you draw so well, but your destiny changed on that night on January 2015 when you attended a party at Stanford University with your youngest sister, Tiffany. So, if it's okay with you, I'm really fed up with people having tell you the whole story over and over and over again at the beginning of every interview. So I'm going to do it myself very quick so we can talk about you after. Yeah?
Sounds great.
So at this party, you got drunk and you blacked out. You were dragged outside by a young man called Brooke Turner. He sexually assaulted you behind a dumpster. You were unconscious, and you were saved by two guys who drove their bikes past the scene. Your aggressor tried to flee. They stopped him. You were taken to the hospital, and the next day when you woke up, you didn't remember a thing. You found out about your rape a few days later in the media. And a year later, justice convicted Brooke Turner. He was found guilty of rape. He was sentenced to a very light sentence because, well, he was a good swimmer, I guess. The whole world had their eyes on this trial, and many feminist activists, including in France, consider it to be the spark that enabled the Me Too movement that broke on fall 2017. What made your story viral was actually the 12 pages detailed and incredibly moving victim impact statement you read at the end of the trial. This text was read by a million people and probably enabled you to write this book. During this whole time, you were known to the world as Emily Doe. It was the name you were given during the trial to protect your identity. And now you come in front of the world with your real name and your real identity. Why was it important that people finally know your name?
First, I want to say that I actually love hearing my story told to me, saying you were assaulted, and then you wrote a victim impact statement, and then the world responded. And I feel like you can keep telling me my prophecy. And I just want to keep sitting here and hearing how my next 10 years will go. I'm just nodding along like, yeah, that's a pretty good,
it's a good summary.
Good story.
Yeah.
A lot of twists and turns. It was a long process deciding to come forward. And it's important that people know that when I signed the book contract, I wasn't agreeing to come forward at the end. It had to be on my own time. And only when I completed the book did I make the decision, because previously I had tried so hard to separate the identities of Emily Doe and Chanel Miller and really keep everything compartmentalized. And even the first draft of the book, I wrote the story of Emily Doe. I wanted to call the book Emily Doe. And it was just about the case because that's what they were paying me to write about. And then it was only on the second draft of the manuscript that my editor said, can we add in the members of your family and your partner? Can we hear some more about your childhood and your past relationships so that we understand what your viewpoints are about love and how you should be taken care of? And adding all of these personal details, and even something as simple as, you know, the moment that I get home from the hospital and my sister's driving and we pull into the driveway, I go home and I think that's the end of the scene. But my editor said, how big is your house? Can you describe what it looks like? Because if the house is large, then it's easy for you to hide and conceal the story from your parents for a longer amount of time. If the house is small, then you're forced to confront it sooner, maybe. So all of a sudden, I realized there are so many details that are particular to me. There's universal themes, but the beauty of literature and telling your story is that you have all of these unique traits, and the house you grew up in is different than the next person. And so for the second draft, I included all of these really rich and colorful details and intimate. And by the end, I realized you cannot neatly separate the story of Emily Doe and the story of Chanel, that it's so integrated that my only option is to come out as myself and just say, I am both of these people, but I can never be reduced to just one story.
Yeah. I have maybe a theory that's going to sound weird to you about this, but your story is very unique, but it's also very archetypal. Well, the first minutes after your aggression, you didn't even know you were a victim. So you were totally out of this story. Then there is a second moment where you are a victim, but you're not yourself. You have this name that's not yours, and people around you don't know you're a victim. And then there is this third step when you finally are yourself and accept, and you can be identified in the society as someone who suffered from this aggression. And I think it's like a kind of a fast-forward process of what many rape victims go through, because there is amnesia, there is denial, there is dissociation, and finally reconciliation. And I think what is very striking about your case is that maybe it sounds a lot, 5 years to reach this moment where you can finally be okay with what happened to you, but it's actually pretty short. And some victims take 30 or 40 years to go through all these phases. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. And there's such a difference between telling your story right after it happens and telling it 5 years later.
Yeah.
And I think the added element is there's something to celebrate later on, because at first I thought no one is allowed to hear this story because it will swallow me whole. And later on, I realized that I had developed these qualities like being outspoken and being confrontational that I had never had before. And I wanted to embody them fully. And I wanted people to know that I had changed, not just negatively, but in ways that were incredible even to me. And I think when a survivor finally comes forward, she's not doing it just to say, hey, everyone, by the way, I was assaulted, now you know. She's doing it to say, I was assaulted, and yet here I am. And that's an amazing thing. That's a joyous moment. It's not just devastating. And for me, it did feel, it was a wonderful time.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so strong what you're saying. And also I like the way that you manipulate the word victim.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I think it's so beautiful that in English you can use the word survivor.
Mm-hmm.
This is something you would never hear in French. You would never call a rape victim une survivante. It would sound very, very weird. It would sound more like, a reality show or something. So, yeah, and I think it's interesting because at the same time in this book you say, I was the victim of Brooke Turner. Well, I'm not his victim, although. But also you say nobody wants to be defined by the worst thing that happened to them. And this is a very strong sentence. And it shows that a victim has to be defined as a victim to get reparation. But it's also very risky for her because she doesn't want to be boxed under this label.
Yeah, and the funny part is, in the beginning, I rejected the label of victim. Mm-hmm. You want to be above it, and you think that victim is affiliated with weakness and shame. And then we go to trial, and all of a sudden, my assailant is the one saying he's the victim. He said the Swedes, when they were on top of him, they broke his wrist. He had to wear a cast for a long time. And then I said, wait a minute, I'm the victim. And I didn't realize that people actually lose sight of who's the victim in the case. And that's when I realized sometimes it's okay to say, yes, you are the victim of a crime. You are vulnerable and you do need help. That's perfectly okay to admit. We don't have to transcend our suffering. We don't have to survive. And some people don't survive. That's why I refuse to be kept in a triumphant light, because the reality is still so brutal. I'm constantly slipping back to the past or places, my mind, has these old mindsets that it sometimes slips into. I'm not always confident. I don't always speak with clarity. I'm very aware of that. And so surviving is just an ongoing activity. It's more of a verb than a noun.
Yeah. In France, the conservative hate the Me Too movement because they say it's victimizing. Have you ever heard this term, and do they use it also in the U.S.?
Will you elaborate a little more?
Like they say, women victimize themselves, and they don't even elaborate more, but it's just supposed to be something very bad to victimize yourself.
To me, that's just a way of saying, how dare you ask for more? Or how dare you ask the world to shape around you or accommodate your needs?
Speaking of the Me Too movement, it started a bit more than a year after you published your impact statement. Do you remember what you felt when you found out about it, when you saw that hashtag appear online?
Well, my book was due at that time.
Wow.
So I said, hold on, something is happening. And my editor just said, go, write. And I wrote another 100 pages after that. But the way I saw it was that survivors were peeking over a cliff into the water. You don't know if it's shallow or deep. And people just started flinging themselves off of the cliff. Oof. And I was watching, looking for which spots are best to jump, where it's going to be safest. But I'm so grateful to them because they were actively testing the waters. And you never know how people will respond to you. You don't know if you'll be safe. Nothing is guaranteed. And that's made very clear. It was made clear to me before I came forward. No one can truly protect you. You have to make this decision on your own and pay the consequences, but you also feel like you have no other choice at some point. Like it becomes too big inside you. It can no longer be contained. But of course, I was so grateful that I saw the technique of jumping, and where I should aim to land.
And some people also crashing because it can be also very dangerous.
Yes.
Do you think the trial would have been different if it had happened after Me Too?
Yes. I don't think it would have played out differently in court. I think the defense attorney would have asked the same questions, but I also think maybe the reporters would have had a heightened awareness of how to report on these issues. I think the jury would have come in with an extra layer of education. And so even if the court systems are outdated and the methods remain the same, you hope that the general public comes in with this new level of understanding so that they're not pulled so easily in every direction and can really sniff out the truth and keep their focus on it.
So if it's okay with you, I want to go back to the story and observe the way the different institutions reacted to your story. And first of all, I would like to talk about justice. It's very interesting the way in your book you show that structurally the justice system is made to make you feel as a victim very small, to make you feel like ashamed, to make you feel like you don't have any space to really speak. Why was it important for you to show this system?
Because every time I emerged from testifying, I felt like they had scooped me out. I felt really hollow and fragile. I couldn't form sentences after that. I had to sleep for long periods of time. And I always, I would get to my car and just recline my seat and kind of bang myself over the head about what I had gotten wrong. And I didn't understand which wrong turn I had taken. I felt like I didn't answer quickly enough. And in the book, I described the defense attorney as tying my shoelaces together and forcing me to run. But I always felt like I hadn't done enough. I was inadequate. I was stupid in some way, just failing to meet some impossible standard. It was only when I got the court transcripts to write the book and I printed them out and read them word by word did I understand how the defense attorney had structured his questions. They were all leading questions. Not a single one was open-ended. They say, you didn't have any bruises, right? He just wanted confirmation of his statements, but he was never interested in genuinely listening. And I just thought, how gross is this? He's just paid a lot of money to try and come in and make me say different things. I also describe myself as a mule, and he's the one dangling the carrot, asking me to go in different directions. But it was never about listening.
And also, it was very brave of you to go to justice. At the very one of the elements that makes your story so unique is the intervention of those two guys, because they were how do you say that they testified? Yeah. Mm-hmm. They could testify the rape happened because they saw it with their eyes. And also they stopped the guy, so we knew who he was. And that's a very rare situation. And at the beginning of the book, you say how one of your friends told you, this is your opportunity. You got to go. You have a chance to have justice done. Did you expect things to be that hard when you decided to press charges and have this trial happen?
No, I thought it would be very easy because my assailant was caught running.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, he's just going to say, hang his head low and apologize and have some punishment. So I had no idea what I was signing up for. And it really just felt like you're walking down an extremely narrow tunnel that's so narrow, each shoulder is touching each wall, and it becomes impossible to turn around. You're too far. And people say it's brave, but it was also, I felt like I had no choice. And the sad thing is that I was in this really small percentage that's even allowed to get to trial because so many cases are dropped, not because the attorney doesn't believe the victim, but because they say, you don't have enough evidence and we're not going to put you through that if we already know it's not going to work out. And so it was painful to understand that I was like a VIP, that this was extremely rare. But I had no framework for what it would look like moving forward.
You were a VIP, but you were also so little armed against this system. I think it's very interesting when the probation judge calls you. So this is very specific from the American, maybe even Californian system. You don't have this in France. But first of all, Brock Turner is found guilty of the felonies he was accused of. And then a couple months go by to decide what is going to be the punishment. So a probation judge calls you, like out of the blue. You're not prepared for this call. You haven't talked to your lawyer. You don't even know how the justice system works. And she asks you, what would you think would be a good punishment for Brock Turner, basically? And you're like, I don't want him to rot in jail forever. Like, You're not crazy. You're like, I just want him to understand. I want him cured. I want him to not repeat what is done. I want him to grow up and understand. And she understands that you don't want him to be too heavily punished and turns your intervention into something that is against you. And I think this is so mind-blowing because in this interaction with justice, you behave like a woman. You're being polite, you're being sweet, you're being like a nice young girl, and also you behave like someone you're not a lawyer, you don't know how justice works. So how could you fight with being this person?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not trained in therapy. I don't have any credentials. I didn't have memory. I remember being so angry at myself before testifying because I thought all of these people are showing up to fight for me or fight against me, and I don't even have a story. Like, I have nothing to offer to this fight. I just felt so worthless. And I want to say that earlier you said, you had no armor going in, or you weren't given armor. And my argument is that we shouldn't be given armor. Why should we need it? Why are we, after an assault, put in a position where we're harmed even more? Why should it feel like going into battle? Why can't I remain open? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? Remaining open and honest and telling our stories and then being properly taken care of. After my experience in court, I thought I don't trust anyone. I'm not speaking to anyone ever again. I'm going to write because that's safe and quiet and no one will interrupt me on the page. But when I finished writing and my team was assembling and I got a publicist and they started saying, here's all your media inquiries, I felt rage. Like, don't talk to me about this. Don't put me in a room with anyone. What do they want from me? What's their angle going to be? I didn't think a question could just be a question. And when I finally, sat down to do my first interview, my media trainer reminded me, if you are uncomfortable, you can leave. If they disrespect you, you don't have to stay there. And that's not how it was in court. I thought you are allowed to violate my boundaries as endlessly as you want to, and I will be forced to take it. But in real life, that's not true. And then when I would cry during the interview, my makeup artist says, stop everything, and runs over, pulls these little tissues out of her fanny pack, dabs my eyes. And even if they want to continue, they say, nope, Chanel's hair is a little bit flying away, so we're going to smooth it down and make her pretty. And then at one point, is Chanel hungry? Okay, shut everything down. Let's get a salad. What do you want on your salad? Do you want sesame seeds? Do you want miso ginger dressing? And even being given preferences in my food choice, it's signaling to me you're human and you need nourishment. We will shape this around you. We want you to be comfortable because we are lucky to be receiving something that's so personal and raw. And that is a gift you are giving us. And we want to be good enough to receive it. Whereas in court, it feels like they hit you or they are just extracting from you, ripping it out of you. It's so violent, even though everyone's just sitting still. It's so internally rupturing. And so my argument is that we shouldn't have to develop armor. We should develop society to make it a place that's more receptive so that when we tell our stories, we actually come out lighter. We feel better after, not crushed. And I understand now that that's an option. We just fail so often to create that kind of space for survivors.
Wow. Yeah, and the parallel when you tell about the media, in the book you describe really well how during the trial you stopped eating, you stopped taking care of yourself, you lost so much weight. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you didn't recognize yourself because you were like so tired and you didn't take care of your hair anymore. And I think that, yeah, it's very interesting to compare those two stages. And I understand also why you were so scared to go back in front of the media with your book, because the media were the worst in this story. Let's begin with the first time you found out about your own aggression, which is, I think, something no one wants to go through. It's probably very violent to live. And the first thing the media says, oh, but this guy is a very brilliant student, a great swimmer, might go to the Olympics someday. His life is ruined. That's incredible to think that the first reflex of the media was to pity this guy, and you were nothing or no one.
Yeah, and you have to pay attention to language in these articles, because when an article says his life was upturned, you say upturned by who, by what? And that's passive, instead of saying he upturned his own life. But even in articles, that's a very subtle way of absolving him of his own actions and taking accountability for what he caused. And I remember thinking the first time I read an article that I have nothing to my name, and that the only thing I would ever be is a name inserted in his Wikipedia page. And that's a terrifying reality. And of course, the people who love you will never see you just as a little name. But that's why it's so important to surround yourself with people who really see you, so they can remind you of how much you possess and where you come from, and all these stories that you have that are independent of the case. Because when you're in it, everything is so foggy and you really lose sight of yourself. And like I said earlier, being hollow. Like I just was either numb, so I didn't have to feel what was happening, or I felt what was happening, and then everything just feels like pain. And so it was vital to have just a few key people around me to just remind me who I am.
That you exist.
Yeah, that I exist and that I am loved. You know, you can feel the energy in the courtroom is also so hostile. And that's something that doesn't necessarily come through in reporting, but just that tension in the air and the way people look at you. Again, this doesn't make headlines because it's not graphic. It's not as violent as bruises or blood, but the way someone looks at you can also really be scary or really hurt you. And these are the little nuances I wanted to capture in the writing.
You say the media had empathy for him since the very first day, and it took you years to get empathy from them. And you wait until the end of your book to really name the treatment Brooke Turner received as class privilege and race privilege. It didn't occur to you the first time you saw those articles. You didn't think, oh, this is just this rich white guy who's being treated properly.
I wasn't far enough away to see. Sometimes you need to step back in order to put things into context. But on some level, you're aware, right? Because there's a lot of white men in suits in positions of authority in these rooms. And like, I can't even imagine what it would be like if I walked into a courtroom and then I saw an Asian woman judge and attorney and jury. You know, I'm sure that would have felt different. But when you walk in, you already feel like an outsider. There's a low likelihood that someone there will be able to project themselves into your shoes. So you have to work so much harder to earn and develop that empathy, but it's not something that flows naturally the way it did for my assailant.
Oh. How about the social media? Talk about the media, but the social media was maybe the place where the most violence was written against you.
Yeah. I remember reading local articles too and seeing negative comments and feeling so sad. Like even when I go to the grocery store, who can I trust? Who's on my side? Who's not? And it actually was when I went to a basketball game with my dad that I had this revelation, because there was a man in our row who was yelling so loud throughout the game, saying like, defense, get back on D, pass the ball, what are you doing? And I was like, this man, I would look at the man screaming, and then I would look at the players, and the players do not register for a second that this man even exists. They don't care what he's saying. And if you put that man on the court, he would be so lost. It would be embarrassing. And here he is yelling out advice so boldly. But the players are focused. They're just doing their job. They're listening to the people they work with and trust. And that's all they do. And I thought, okay, when I'm in court, I'm the one who's like on the court, on the basketball court. And everyone else is just eating snacks and taking bathroom breaks and yelling opinions. But it's so easy. It takes literally nothing to give your opinion. And you try living it for a day. You try crying into a microphone, into a room full of strangers and law students who have come in to observe you like a case study for one day, you know? And I realized even though it felt so humiliating at the time, what I was doing was incredibly hard and something very few people would do. So unless you join me on the court, then I don't need to hear from you.
I really love this step of wiseness you've reached now when you tell your story, and when you read your book, you understand you went through many emotions, many other steps before reaching this one. And one that I found interesting is anger. I think the moment when you start writing this victim impact statement is the moment when anger becomes stronger than fear. Am I right?
Yeah. Anger can be a really powerful tool if you can learn to use it. Sometimes it's too much, right? And it consumes you, and then it's impossible. It's paralyzing. But once you get through that initial processing, it runs like a little engine in me. And like you said earlier, there's survivors who are older who identify with my story. I got many letters from people, women in their 50s, who said, "You're the first person I'm telling." And, you know, during the pandemic, there was stuff going on in the White House. I had to testify online before Congress to talk about some of these policies around sexual assault that I really disagreed with, and that all these older lawmakers were drafting. It made me so angry. And in my introduction, I basically said, there are women in your generation who you failed, and they're coming to me. So you didn't do your job, and now I have to do it. So I don't care if you're more qualified or if you have more power, you missed something. And even though we're young and we're still learning, then why are our elders coming to us as confidants? What happened there? The ball was dropped. And so that gives me confidence because I'm also protecting these younger versions of these women who are finally emerging.
And you arrived to these women when we were speaking about anger. So what about their anger? Did they spend their whole life like swallowing it up and never expressing it?
Well, I think it's a beautiful thing when you finally reach anger. And, you know, in the book, it was pointed out to me by my therapist that it means that you're stepping onto your own side. And that's a wonderful thing because for a long time I was really depressed. I was irritant, but I wasn't angry. And when I saw my sister suffering during the case, that's really when my anger activated. And it just burns away a lot of the self-doubt you have. Like, oh, am I doing this wrong? What's he going to do? What should I wear? When you're that mad, you know, I had to communicate that, but I also knew I had to turn down the dial a bit, because if I came in too angry, they'd say, oh, she's just venting or she's crazy. Just like let her get it off her chest and we'll just listen and let her do her thing. But anger, like at the root of all anger, is hurt. And I needed them in court to hear how hurt I was. I'm not angry just for the sake of being mad. I'm angry because I'm in so much pain and I need it to stop.
And so you wrote this beautiful text, 12 pages. You read it at the court. You really thought it was going to help you. You were happy with your text, and basically the judge didn't listen. And you made this little video, and it's really funny because you draw iPods on the judge's head, like he was just like listening to some Adele playlist when you were speaking. That was funny because you're funny. But then the statement was published by BuzzFeed. I wanted to name the journalist that enabled this. What's her name again?
Katie Baker.
Yes. It's really important what she's done as a journalist, I think.
Yeah. And, I sent her the letter and I told her that morning, you can cut as much as you want.
It's too long.
It's way too long. No one's going to read this. I need it edited. And she said, we're not going to touch a single word. And that was also very new to me because I had been so used to having my words shaved off, cut off, limited. There was never a space where I could speak freely. That was the first time I encountered just being unedited. And that was beautiful.
Yeah. It reconciled you with the media?
I think at that time, it was a little bit scary, actually, because the numbers were rising so quickly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were finding me. I just wasn't ready for what was about to happen. I think the most valuable part is the letters that came in and the slow realization of what I had done. Because that day I didn't walk away with my head held high. I didn't think that day would ever be a source of pride. Like, I thought I had made a mistake for reading it. I thought it was more like, why did you share your diary? Like, what are you doing? So it was people who taught me what I had done.
Yeah. And also, I think it was people seeing the real you. Maybe the people who were being like so horrible on the social media were not talking to you. They were talking to this nameless victim. And then finally you came out and people could see the real you, and what you got was real love for yourself. I think it's really beautiful what happened with this impact statement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember in terms of negative online comments, I would read all of them and tell them to my therapist. And she said, have you ever heard any of these comments in person? And I said, no. And that was also a revelation, because when you really sit down with someone, or they really see you, then you become this like wonderfully complex human being, and they can't label you as this and write you off so easily.
I was wondering how your family reacted to the fact that your story went so viral, and even now with your book, your real name is becoming really famous. You went to Oprah, which is like, you cannot reach a higher level of fame, I think, being interviewed by Oprah. How is your family dealing with all this?
Yeah, I took my parents to that interview, and they just want me to be safe and okay. And I think one wonderful thing is that when I finally came forward, like, you have to realize I was anonymous for about 4 years, which meant in some way they had to keep my secret too. And they had no relief. They couldn't consult anyone to get help either. And so in a way, I was trapping all of us in this secrecy. So when I finally revealed my name, even though we were all quite nervous, they were finally able to go and get the support they needed. And we often just focus on the victim because she's the one who's physically hurt. She's the one who's tended to at the hospital. But you think about who else is sitting in the courtroom with her, who's picking her up from the hospital. How does it feel for them to watch this person they love suffering in a way that they can't stop? That's really traumatizing. And we forget about how many people one assault can affect and how the helpers need help too. When the victim's finally in a stable place, it's time for her caretakers to then find a way to replenish and really talk about what it was like for them.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the only moments when you cry or lose it a bit now is when you talk about your sister.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a place that's not being healed yet because she's been also very, brutalized during the...
Yeah. I wanted so badly to protect her. And that was always our dynamic. I was the older sister. And it just, again, it made me so angry because I don't care how educated you are or how prestigious the defense attorney was. You don't stoop that low. You don't make these easy jabs. It was so indecent. And luckily, I was lucky she was there in some ways because we gravitate so naturally toward humor. And there's a scene in the book where we're trying on court clothes and they were just so frumpy and ugly and beige. We're like, we can't believe we would put them on and do little model walks for each other. But it was a way of lifting the darkness, even just for a second, for each other. I think that's how we got through.
Yeah. But I think it's important to remember that the defense attorney started his final speech by saying her sister thought she was fine.
Yeah.
And I think it's so symbolic of how you're always going to find another woman to blame.
Yes.
On what happened, to a woman. It's incredible. It's like so perfect, like, of course her sister is responsible. Thank you, bye.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy. Your mom seems to be an incredible person too. Mm-hmm. She was a writer too, and she fled from China in the 80s after the Cultural Revolution. What has she taught you that helped you through all this?
Well, when I told her I got a book deal for 90,000 words and was really nervous about it, she just said, 90,000, easy. So she's well-seasoned in writing, which is amazing. I also love that because she's a writer, she's always been so open. And there was never a part where she'd say, oh, don't share that. That's too private, or people may look at you differently. It was all okay. Like, it was all just true to life, all this crap that we go through. And because it's all of us. It's just that some people show it more and other people hide it better. Like, that's the only difference between me and the next person. So her willingness to just accompany me on these huge ups and downs were so important. And then, my mom, some of the legal jargon, it was lost on me and it was lost on her, but she had different ways of taking care of me, feeding me. There's this pressure point in between your thumb and your index finger, and if you squeeze it, then it will alleviate headaches. So during some meetings with my DA, I'd be the one taking notes, but she'd be the one sitting next to me, kind of lightly pressing my pressure points and, signaling someone is here to look after your body. And so mentally, it took a lot from me, right? I'm the one who uses English and harnesses language to get through, but she was tending to my body like it was its own person. And, she, when I was really struggling and, openly said, like, I just really can't see a way forward. She said, well, when she was growing up in China, she didn't even know what a swimming pool was. Had never even seen or heard of one. And then we had this house in California with a pool with like orange and lemon trees, and we had a convertible and could drive down these highways. And she's like, this, what is an ordinary day to you is a dream for me. And one day, like, the way life works is that it's so unimaginable. And even with all the ideas you have, you can't even come up with how wonderful your life can be. And it's so strange looking back because, like, she was right. Do
you want to drink some water?
Oh, sure, I'll have some, yeah.
Take your time, it's okay.
Yeah, I don't think I'm so busy just trying to keep my head on straight and getting things done and doing well during interviews. But when you really reflect, she was just right. Like, she didn't know that. It's like, she wasn't like, it's okay, you're going to write a statement and it's going to go viral and the vice president will support you and then you'll get a book deal. You'll support yourself for many years. Yeah. Then you'll go to Oprah's house and she'll give you pink lemonade and dried apricots and you'll sit on her balcony and she'll hold you. Like, all of these things happened. But my mom didn't know. But I think there's something, it's like, it's so nice to have someone just, in her vision, hold this life for you, and you feel like it's waiting for you, even though don't know the details of it yet. And I just hope it's like a hard thing to tell people, like, oh, it's okay, like, it'll be fine, you just don't know how. It's like, it takes so much waiting and patience. But I do think in the same way life can really suddenly traumatize you and be terrible in an instant, there are moments where it can be wonderful in an instant. Someone finds your letter or you meet the right person. Like, all the time, our lives are changing. And it can change in very unexpected and wonderful ways too.
Yeah. It's such a great lesson of life to listen to you because, it's evident you're a writer. You are such an incredible storyteller. But at some point you said in an interview that you were, it's not the topic I would have chosen, but it's the topic I have been given. And I think it's such a strong philosophy in life. Like, you basically been given the most bitter lemon and you made like pink lemonade out of it. Like, did you learn from this also?
Yeah, it helped me write to think that this was not something I'm currently going through, but as a topic I've been assigned, because then it becomes much more interesting, because then your past just becomes research and all of these really terrifying people just become characters in your story. And so I thought, oh, this is a gruesome topic, but at the same time, I've been given so much information and now I just have to convert it to my own language. And that can actually be really fun because in the lived reality, like, I cried so many times. And in the book, I just say I cry. And I was like, well, this isn't interesting. And so I had to think about, okay, at this time were my eyes glistening? Did I have a single drop coming out? At this time, was it more about my breathing and chest tightening? Did I have snot glossing my upper lip? Like, what type of crying were my eyes glazed. And so I loved kind of sitting and playing with language and finding the right words to preserve these moments and really honor them and distinguish them. And not just, oh, she cried, but each time you're processing something different, realizing something different. I cried just now, but that was a good cry, you know. It's like an awakening to something. And so that part is the fun part.
Are you writing something else? Are you planning to write something else?
Yeah, I'm writing this really lovely story right now for younger readers. It'll be my dream one day to go into an auditorium that's full of kids who, you know, call things out or openly laughing. I just, that environment of court was so serious and buttoned up. Sometimes I wanted to laugh because I was like, gosh, this is this is a lot. Everyone's quite miserable and there's no art anywhere. And so I want to continue to create spaces where people can express themselves freely, talk freely, laugh, cry, whatever they want.
I think you have a lot to bring to other people. And
thanks.
Yeah, everything you're doing with the book, I can really feel it's about sharing all this strength and knowledge you've earned through the whole process.
Good. Yeah, and just I felt so lucky to receive all of these letters. Like, it was just, I imagined this water tower full of like pink liquid, like that's love. And every day I can only drink a little bit, but it's like so much for one lifetime. I felt almost like greedy having this abundant amount of love from all over the world. And so in the book, I wanted you to see it and realize that all of that love was coming for anonymous Emily Doe. And you can project yourself into her role too and understand that all of this support is for you. You don't have to say your name or prove your credentials, but that it can just flow in so abundantly. I wanted people to feel what I felt.
Mm-hmm. If you had to do it again, would you do it the same way?
Oh, that's very philosophical. I would have gotten help sooner. I think I really wanted to protect the people around me, but there are people in your life who want to come to bat for you. I thought, I don't want to take you out of a sunshiny place, but they want to be in those dark parts with you. That's what it means to love somebody. So I wish I had let them in sooner. I wish I realized how normal my emotions were. Like, all of these feelings of denial and unbelievable rage were just really normal, given the circumstances that I was being put through. I hope anyone... I will just always remember how lonely it was in the beginning. And I would never wish to condemn someone to that isolation. And I hope that, by talking about this so openly, you shorten that period of time where you're just in your room alone, ruminating, trying to figure it all out by yourself. Because this is something that we're all meant to help figure out with you and support you through. And so I hope, the person finds support sooner.
Mm. So it's a strange question I ask to all my guests. The podcast is called La Poudre. It means the powder. So when I tell you the powder, what do you think of?
I think about how I'm always told I'm supposed to powder my face before being on camera because you're not supposed to be shiny, but I don't understand why it's bad to be shiny.
I love it.
I think you look nice, like a little glazed donut, or you look bright, but apparently you're supposed to powder so your skin is more matte. Anyway.
I love this. Such a good remark. Thank you so much, Chanel. It was great speaking to you.
Thank you for having me, Lauren.
Thank you. Thank you to Chanel Miller for speaking up in La Poudre. Lorraine Bastide is the executive producer of La Poudre, a podcast prepared by Gaia Marty, assisted by Marie Vincent, recorded, produced, and mixed by Marion Henry, and broadcasted exclusively on Spotify.